Welcome to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. We feature top entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world, those who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective to their life and business. Now, let's get started with the show.
David Nilsson here. I'm the host of this podcast. As you know, we connect with business leaders from around the world who have a borderless mindset and are willing to share best practices, new innovations, and new ideas to help us thrive in a rapidly changing world. Now, this episode is brought to you by Doxa Talent. Doxa helps businesses to source full-time, dedicated, and highly skilled workers from all over the world. And as a result, these companies can scale faster, increase margin, and improve culture. If you want to learn how to grow your business with offshore professionals, simply go to doxatalent.com. Now, today's podcast is really exciting. Ryan Zink, with over 2 decades in franchising, has had a huge impact on this industry. He was a founder of companies like Franchise Fastlane, the largest franchise sales organization in the US, and also Franchise Sidekick, which is currently redefining how franchise consulting can more effectively empower other entrepreneurs through franchising. And prior to all of this, Ryan was a franchisee many times and eventually started Complete Nutrition, this time as the franchisor versus the franchisee, and grew that to over 200 units. His belief in franchising as a path to entrepreneurship is fueled by the opportunities that franchising has provided for him. And I think, I've enjoyed a friendship with Ryan over the past decade. And while I've profound respect for what he's done professionally, and while he's been a very successful entrepreneur, I admire that he's a family man at heart. Ryan really prioritizes his wife, 4 sons, and dog, illustrating that we all have the power to live a life by design. So listen in. All right, Ryan, welcome to The Future is Borderless.
I appreciate you having me, Dave.
Yeah, this will be fun. I want to start, though, talking a little bit about how you got into franchising in the first place and sort of what motivated you to get there. And then I'd love to, maybe as a follow-on question, so, how did you get into franchising? And then how did it shape your perspective of business ownership? And maybe we can start there.
Yeah, great question. Well, like a lot of people, I just fell into franchising completely by accident. I was just about to graduate school. I got a degree in journalism and I met a girl, became my wife. She wasn't going to graduate yet. So I decided I wasn't going to move away and do the journalism thing. One of my best friends was working in a franchised GNC store. And lucky for me, that franchisee was super entrepreneurial, very willing to invest into people. And I learned from him and it just continued to snowball, which I'm sure we'll get in to my career in franchising. But that's how I got in. I just fell in by accident and it has completely reshaped my life. I mean, the reason that I do what I do today is because of how impactful franchising was on my life, on my ability to live life on my own terms. And it's completely turned into my purpose to help other people do the same.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about maybe your perspective about running or owning a business before you got involved with GNC. And then after being in that experience, like how did that sort of shift your view on it?
Yeah, I like to say I didn't know how to spell entrepreneur before that. I still struggle with entrepreneur sometimes. But
we all do.
But I really thought business ownership was very risky, something that a lot of people failed at prior to that. Again, I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial home, so I didn't understand anything about the economics or employees or customer satisfaction or any of that. And when I got to GNC, I was just amazed because I'm like, look at all the products sitting on these shelves that they have figured out. Look at the technology that we get to use that they figured out. People just walk in the door and they know exactly what we're offering because of the marketing and the branding. And it really quickly became an interest to me. And again, like I said, I had an owner who was investing into me and into educating me on what that was all like. So I quickly progressed in his organization to become the COO. And we would go out and buy underperforming GNC franchisees and apply a little bit of a different model to it that worked really well. So I got a complete crash course in about a year and a half, going from I'll never own a business, I don't know what it means, to I am absolutely in love with the idea of owning a franchise business.
Yeah, so it's interesting though, and we're going to try and get through the early stages of your career fairly quickly, but you transitioned from being a franchisee, and it sounds like a very entrepreneurial-minded franchisee, to actually becoming a franchisor. So would you talk a little bit about how that happened, and then what was it like making the shift from being the franchisee to the franchisor, which is a very different model? And I'd love to just sort of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great question. So, lots to unpack there, and I'll try to do it quickly. First off, I felt like it was a miss on the franchisor's part. I believe a franchisor, one of the greatest tools they have is what I call model the masters, right? There is absolutely a winning formula. When you go and you look at all your franchisees across the system, there's somebody who's fantastic at marketing, at sales, at employee retention, at customer satisfaction. And my feeling is a franchisor's job is not to come up with all the answers on their own. Their job is to aggregate all of that information from their franchisees, put it into a pretty package, and then figure out a way to test it and roll it out to everyone else. That's what a really, truly great franchisor does. Well, back then we had a formula where we were using products that were exclusively sold in our stores or other franchise stores. We were marketing significantly different. We were employing people and paying them significantly different, but we also had the top 5 GNC stores in the country. We were buying other people's stores and we were quickly turning them around. But instead of embracing this idea, we really got a little bit of a stiff arm, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but we got a bit of a stiff arm as to, this is not the business model that's going to be replicated across the thousands and thousands of stores. So we quickly felt as if we were no longer welcome, or if our business model was no longer welcome. And the idea behind our business model was it was more consultative. The average ticket back then in GNC across the country, I think, was in the high 20s or the low 30s per basket. Ours was, over 80. And it was because we were really consulting the customer. We were spending significant time with them. Our employees were well trained on lifestyle and way to change into healthy habits. So ultimately, again, to fast forward, we went from GNC franchisees to then manufacturers of product, which ultimately was a springboard to us saying, well, if our model's not going to be welcome over there, maybe it's just an invitation for us to go do something different on our own. So that's when we founded our own franchise called Complete Nutrition.
Yeah. Now talk about that though. So being a franchisee is different than a franchisor. You're responsible as a franchisee for growing your business as a franchisor. I'm probably oversimplifying this, but you're now responsible for helping others grow their business. So talk to me a little bit about that transition. Is there anything that you sort of learned during then that helped you in the next stage of your career?
100%. And it's the old adage, if you want to understand somebody's story, walk a mile in their shoes. And I really underappreciated the value that we got from GNC as a franchisor, right? They had thousands of stores, years and years of branding, a tremendous system. And we were extremely profitable across our 15 stores. We were doing something close to $20 million in sales. It was extremely profitable. We had employees that were highly compensated. And then when it all converted over to Complete Nutrition, that all went away. Nobody knew who we were. They didn't know if we were selling treadmills, food, or supplements. Our employees didn't have the customers coming in that were able to support them and their compensation needs. We had to completely re-educate. It took us 2 years. We went from the most profitable GNC franchisees in the country to founding our own business, to taking 2 years to turn our own profit. However, that 2 years was a wonderful education for us as to what we needed to provide future stores in order to be successful. So, to quickly sum up the answer, I would say I went from very unappreciative of everything we got to a huge appreciation as to what you need to do as a franchisor to provide support and services to franchisees.
That's so funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine about, I've got 2 young kids. I know you've got family as well. I was sharing that before I had kids, everyone would say, well, you don't really appreciate this until you become a parent yourself. And I used to say, well, look, I'm uncle to like 16 nieces and nephews. I have a really good idea what I'm getting into. And then I became a parent. I realized I have no idea what this is like. So similar. Talk to me a little about the next step from there, because when I actually first met you, it was when you were at Complete Nutrition. You guys eventually exited that business, and then you started something called Franchise Fastlane, which is an FSO. And I think just because not all of my audience comes from the franchise industry, it'd be good for you to just share a little bit about what is an FSO. But more importantly, I'm just curious, like what gap did you see, or what opportunity were you excited about that made you think, I want to jump in and start an FSO?
What a great question, and what an important one that I had to answer to get to where I am today and to do what I'm doing today. So, my entire career has been leapfrog from one thing to the next, all in a similar space. Nutrition into a nutrition franchisor, into a nutrition franchisor, into just selling franchises. And why that was important is towards the end of Complete Nutrition, we started to outsource franchise development to a franchise sales organization. And I got an opportunity to see them firsthand and to see what they were doing. I started to learn about franchise brokers across the country. I started to learn the names and everything else. And then we went through the private equity transaction with Complete Nutrition. I stayed on for 1 year. And then for me, it was what's next. And, I had a little bit of a early life crisis, I guess, and an identity crisis into this has been all I've done. Nutrition has been all I've done since I left college. That was 22 to 35, so 13 years of my life. And now what am I going to do? And I couldn't stay in the nutrition space. Obviously, I had a non-compete. And I started writing down all these different business ideas, and I met a fellow EOer. I know you and I are both part of EO, and I met him and sat down. And as I started to lay out these different concepts, he kind of gave me the capital T timeout. What are you doing? You're trying to completely reinvent yourself into space you don't know. You're rushing into these things. And he said, let me give you a piece of advice, which is some of the most important advice I've ever gotten in my life. He said, I know you, and I believe you should do what you know with people you know. Just find something that you feel you can do better. So instead of going out and trying to completely reinvent myself, go do something that you know and find an opportunity, as you asked. So the opportunity that I thought I saw with Franchise Fastlane, that's ultimately what we did. We started Franchise Fastlane, which is a franchise sales organization. And to your question, a franchise sales organization represents franchisors to help them find franchisees to develop their concept across the country. I'm not the first to come up with it. Others have done it before me. But we did see an opportunity, and it was very much in three categories. The first one was on the front end. We thought there was a lack of real understanding of whether or not a franchisor had what it took to develop nationally, to become the next big thing, right? What did they have in leadership and capital, in competitive differences, in the ability to support franchisees? So we put a very robust system on the front end. And, still today, Fastlane only approves around 7 or 8% of franchisors that apply, right? And so there's a very strict criteria in order for them to represent. So that was number one. Number two was we wanted to base this on technology, right? This was, 7, 8 years ago. And technology was not really prevalent on this side of franchise sales yet. It was very much pick up the phone, dial. We had a lot of back and forth and communication via phone, but there wasn't a lot of people using video calls yet or significantly diving into CRMs, automations throughout that sales process. So we wanted to dive into that. And third was I am a huge believer in focus. And this still today is a problem, I believe, in many franchise sales experiences, is people try to be everything. They try to be the person that's finding the lead, qualifying the lead, scheduling them, all the way through the idea of becoming a franchisee, which involves funding and legal and so many different things. So at Fastlane, we decided that we were going to employ people at every step of that process so they could be the best in the world at one thing and just do it over and over again. And, 3 years later, we were fortunate to turn Fastlane into the largest franchise sales company in the country.
Yeah, and very great reputation too. I want to just go in and to use the term of one of my sales team members, double click on something that you just said there. You talked about focus and the fact that you guys only approve 7 to 8% of the concepts that come to you. This is something that I find in growing businesses. Everybody has an insatiable appetite for revenue, excited about every new opportunity that comes, but it's really easy for a business to get distracted and to sort of bifurcate its resources because it's chasing every opportunity versus being very clear on who its ICP or ideal customer profile is. Who was Franchise Fastlane's ideal customer? Like when you really think about it, you're only approving 7 to 8% of these franchisors. What was it about those 7 or 8% that were, really telling to you?
Yeah, great question. And trust me, it was still a little bit more of an art than a science. But we had what we called our must-haves and our nice-to-haves, right? And I'm 3 or 4 years removed from onboarding brands, so forgive me if I forget some. But the must-haves were a certain amount of working capital, a leader that was extremely experienced either in their field or in franchising, right? We would call franchisees and make sure that there was validation. There had to be a minimum number of locations, minimum ROI. So we would look for a minimum of 2 to 1 return on investment from average sales back to initial investment. And really it was 3 to 1 is what we ended up landing on to get to that 7 to 8%. We had a minimum profitability number. I know I'm missing a few, no historical legal problems, and I'm sure I'm missing a few. So that was very much in our must-haves. And then we had our nice-to-haves as well. And it was a stringent list. I mean, really, we were looking for brands that could add at least 50 locations a year and support them well. So again, that's just not 90+% of the franchisors, emerging franchisors anyway, that were knocking on our door.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I think this is just an important lesson for anybody who's thinking about being a business owner. I think I've seen way more businesses fail because they lack focus or strategic execution versus, an abundance of opportunity. So I think that was just a really good place to add some additional commentary.
If you don't mind, I just want to go a little bit deeper because it's important to you because you bring it up there. It's very important to me now too. And I learned it from making mistakes. Back as a franchisor, we were very much what's the next opportunity and we chased it often. And I learned you cannot be great at all those things. And so, I know we'll start talking a little bit about my transition into franchise sidekick. And if you asked anybody here and that you asked them, what kind of leader is Ryan? They're going to tell you he's very much focused on one particular thing, and that's helping people reduce their risk when buying a franchise. And that's it. We've got an abundance of opportunity like every entrepreneur out there. We've got a lot of people knocking on our door to do different things. We've got plenty of other things that we could do. But like Jim Collins taught us in his book, Good to Great, is our hedgehog is to help people reduce their risk when buying a franchise. And that's all we're going to do until we feel they're best in the world at it. And then we'll preserve that core and start adding on. But it's so important from experienced entrepreneurs talking to your audience, focus on being the best in the world at one thing.
Yeah, and actually, I'll just note, you gave one book recommendation. The One Thing by Greg McKeown is another one that is sort of in line with what you just said. You brought up Franchise Sidekick, so let's talk about that. So you had another successful exit with Franchise Fastlane. You've now got this opportunity to think about what am I going to do next? So now you've started Franchise Sidekick. Similar question, what opportunity did you see and why did you jump into this side of franchise sales?
Yeah, great question. Lucky for me, there was no identity crisis this time. I know exactly who I am now, and it's that I want to help people become entrepreneurs, right? I'm very passionate about it. And I really didn't have any plans to sell Fastlane. I absolutely love that business. We were helping people buy businesses, become entrepreneurs, right? We were profitable. I had a co-founder that was running the day-to-day. I really had no pain. But like all things, life is funny and an opportunity knocked. And at first I had an allergic reaction to it. I said, no, thank you. But as we went through the process and I understood what the financial opportunity was, it also got me thinking a little bit about, well, what could that look like? And I knew I was still very passionate about helping people buy franchises. So I went back and I said, there's one way that I would consider bringing on an equity partner. And we had a little 2-person team inside of Fastlane. Today Fastlane's over 100 employees and we were probably 50 or 60 at the time. 2 people were focused on organic marketing. Marketing to leads who didn't know what franchise brand they wanted to open. We would bring them in and we would just show them, one of the 20 brands that we had. And I went back to the equity company and I said, if I could buy out that 2-person team and go to the other side of the equation, the client side, again, Fastlane was representing the seller, the franchisor. I wanted to go represent the buyer, the client looking for the franchise. I said, if I could do that, then I would consider going through this transaction. They ultimately agreed. And now we are a significant lead source for Fastlane and many other franchisors around the country. And speaking of books, there was such an influential book to me at the time. I was reading Donald Miller's book called Building a Story Brand.
Yeah.
Just love that book. To frame it up really quickly, he talks about every movie, every book that we love, got a hero who has a problem, who meets a guide with a proven process to create a desired outcome. And he said, the business is not the hero. The customer, the client is the hero. And so me and Tyler, the co-founder here at Sidekick, we said, well, if our client is the hero, who's got the back? Who protects the hero from risk? And we said, a sidekick. So Franchise Sidekick was born. And that goes right back to that focus again of reducing the risk for those people.
So you're Robin to Batman, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like to say I'm Dr. Brown and Marty McFly is what I like to use.
I got it. It's actually one of my favorite books is Brand Story. I think Donald Miller does a great job. And once you see the framework, you see it in every movie that you've ever watched. It's really kind of fun. So you talk about sort of reducing the risk and helping people get into entrepreneurship. How do you do that at Franchise Sidekick? Like what's, obviously not looking for proprietary secrets, but really what's the methodology behind that?
You got it. It's very important. And we call it our Sidekick shield, right? A shield to protect you from risk. And so I'll just get into a couple of the things we do. One that I'm very passionate about is every one of our advisors is an employee of Sidekick. There's certain standards, there's certain training that they're held to. They each have to spend a minimum of 2,000 hours a year working with clients, helping them find franchises and many other things in order to maintain their certification. And the reason that was so important to me is on the Fastlane side, we worked with some of the best franchise brokers in the country. They were amazing people. But it's like the real estate industry where you have a small percentage of really amazing people that do really well at the top and a heavy percentage of them that are doing it part-time, trying to make full-time pay. And that's the same here. And so we would get a tremendous amount of leads that would come to us and the broker was not adding really much value. And this is why I was really passionate about the Sidekick side. I said, well, what if we were the first to have everybody on our team as an employee, not a 1099, where, when you're a 1099, you're responsible again for all the way from finding the lead, qualifying the lead, scheduling the lead, working them all the way through it. So we're going to employ everybody. We're going to have minimum standards that they have to maintain in order to be certified. We find all of the we find all the leads for our advisors. We qualify all the leads for our advisors. So our advisors all day, every day, they get to come in with qualified people on their calendar interested in buying a franchise. So our advisors can be great at one thing, and that's advising clients, right? And it's amazing. I mean, they're working with, 30 or more clients at any one time. Our average advisors are doing more than 70 units a year, which is significantly outpacing the industry. And this is a number of at bats. If you and I are playing baseball and I get 10 times the at bats that you do, I hope I become a better hitter, right? And that's exactly what's happening here. We also have really robust technology that gives inside information. We use AI and an algorithm to match brands based on our franchise fit answers, and I could continue to go on. But this is the power of being an organization all working together as opposed to an individual 1099.
I think maybe the highest compliment I could pay you is a comment that a broker made to me recently at a industry-wide event. And they said, "Oh, Ryan Zink is about to put us all out of business."
Oh, well, I hope we don't, but I hope we can change the industry a little bit. Absolutely.
Well, I think what it underscores is that they really believe that you're going to be capable of building a better mousetrap or better process and have greater impact, which is super exciting for you. So look, I want to transition a little bit into now sort of how you see the industry going forward. Like, we're at this moment where there's a lot of changes happening in the world. You brought up AI a minute ago. That's obviously a very hot topic today. But how have you seen franchising evolve since the day you got started to today? And then what do you think is sort of the trends right now that are going to shape the future of franchising?
Yeah, great question. A trend that is definitely prevalent today, and maybe I wasn't aware of it as much back then, because I was still somewhat new and didn't understand it all, but the consolidation of franchise concepts under what we call a portfolio group, and then the portfolio group having the ability to use shared services in order to support franchisees. There's just a tremendous number of them today, which makes a heck of a lot of sense. If you build this infrastructure, it doesn't matter if I'm helping a franchisee, a fencing franchise or an insulation or a window or a painting or whatever. It's very similar in the mousetrap. I have to identify the customer differences and how to speak to that customer, but the customer acquisition, the customer support, and all those things are very similar if I can theme out the franchise brands under my portfolio. So that is definitely something I've seen. I've also seen a tremendous amount of outsourcing. I didn't feel we could outsource as much. Back when I founded Complete Nutrition in 2005, I didn't feel that there was as many opportunities to outsource as there are today. So today I feel franchisors can be really great at whatever their product is, whether it's their fitness or their dry cleaning, their food, you name it, and they can outsource so much of it. And franchise sales organizations are a great example of that. They really didn't exist like back then, like they do today, where franchisor can say, I've got a really strict criteria on who I want, but I'm going to trust you to go find them. And then I'm going to come in at the tail end of the process to make sure you did a good job.
Yeah.
The continued trends, that the consolidation is going to continue to happen. Absolutely. The use of AI, I don't exactly know where it's going to fit into franchising, but it is a term that is at every conference that I go to now. And so it's just really, I think it's going to help a tremendous amount when it comes to how we find the right employees, how we train them, how we speak to our customers and do other things. Yeah, so I think that's kind of where I would go as far as where franchising is today.
Yeah, the use case for AI is all over the board. What I do know for sure is the future is messy. I would say the future is borderless, but really the future is going to be messy, and we just got to be able to get through that. So tell me, we talked about your ideal customer profile at Fastlane being the franchisor, and you gave some of the attributes that helped a franchisor, you sort of predict whether they could be successful in the future. Let's talk about it from now, Sidekick side, right? Your ICP is the buyer. What are some of the sort of common attributes that you see with those people, and who's sort of the ideal individual for you guys to work with?
Yeah, great question. Like most companies, we've got avatars that we've defined, right? And there's really three primary for us. We've got the portfolio Pete, and a portfolio Pete is an existing business owner, somebody who has experience, somebody who's looking to either add on to their existing business or buy another business. We've got the Freedom Freddies. A Freedom Freddy is somebody who has been, call him a mid-level, him or her, a mid-level manager or better in a company. They've been making great compensation, but they really want to break free from employment. And they're looking for a franchise that can support their family's needs, which is challenging. I was fortunate, you were fortunate. We started businesses very young, before we had kids, before we had significant responsibilities. That's not what most of our clients are today. Many of them have families and financial responsibilities, and we've got to help them identify a franchise that's going to replace their income and support that lifestyle, and then some, even get them to a better place. And then the third is our side business SAMs. And these are people who would like to keep their jobs and find a franchise. This is a little trickier, and I would even say sometimes more controversial in franchising. You have to be extremely clear with these people as to what it means to run a franchise with a job, who's going to do it, what is their management system. It's like anything that's a little bit controversial. You have some people on one side like it absolutely can't happen. Well, you've got other people like absolutely, there's ways to do it. Then you have those in the middle. I'll just use my own personal experience. Every franchise I've ever owned, I've owned about 25 different franchise locations. Every single one has been done semi-absentee. But the definition of that semi-absentee is what's important, right? I will have a vested partner. We have we call it our 6 steps of SAM, our semi-absentee management plan, right? We've got very specific and fundamental things that have to happen in order for that to work. And by the way, these are not franchisors that are advertising themselves as semi-absentee. And so I'm a believer that semi-absentee absolutely can happen in just about any franchise concept, but you've got to be in the right situation with the right person and the right management plan in order to do it.
You brought up the word partner a few times through the conversation. I've been lucky. I've had the same business partner for over 2 decades, still my best friend. But I've seen more partnerships erode, and most of them erode in an ugly way. You've had great partners in multiple business. What do you think is sort of the key to you being able to have successful and sustained relationships with business partners?
Yeah, great question. I hope it starts with core values. The core values of open, honest, and direct, the core values of no surprises, the core value of better together. Also, the understanding that people are around here, we say we want you to bring your real self. It's, a lot of times people say when you show up to work, you got to shut out your personal life and it's all about work. And that is not the case here. We recognize that life is life and you can't leave that at the door. And so we very much appreciate, include, and respect. I call it give them air, right? Appreciate, include, and respect people around here. And that's the human or the core value side. And then of course there's the business fundamental sides. Like when I partner with somebody, I want them to have capital included, right? I need them to be financially vested like I am. I need them to commit to the fact that we are going to run this 6-step management plan that's worked for us, and I believe in it wholeheartedly. We need to have a common and shared vision. We need to understand our responsibilities, what they're going to be responsible for versus what I am. So there's a lot that goes into it. And by the way, all the time people say, what's the hot franchise? And my response is always, that's the wrong question. There's never a lack of a hot franchise, just like there's never a lack of a hot stock. The right question to ask is, who is the person that's going to run the franchise for me? Because the people I meet with are usually not the ones that are going to be standing inside of a franchise location for 40 hours doing it themselves. And that's when you really have to understand that criteria and what's going to work for you. And we train a lot of sidekick clients on exactly what to look for.
Awesome. Well, I know, hey, look, we're getting close to the end of our time. Just a couple more questions. One, I want to just, zoom out past all of this and just ask you, I always love asking people about life lessons. And so I'm curious if you were to sort of share personal, professional, some advice with your 20-year-old self, like what would that be?
Man, great question. One of the most important things in my life now, and something that I share with my kids all the time, is you are the product of the people you surround yourself with. And so the people that I was hanging out with in my 20s were fine, but they weren't necessarily the people that were going to elevate my life or improve my life. I've been very intentional later in life with surrounding myself with people that are going to show me the things that they've done, hold me accountable, challenge me in areas of my life. So surround yourself with those people. Go find the people that you want to be like and do everything you can to be included in that group. And if you can't be next to the sun, I think Gary Vee says this, if you can't be next to the sun, figure out a way to be next to the moon and then eventually propel yourself up. So that is very much one. Just something that I teach my kids all the time is I am a believer in entrepreneurship. I hope that they become entrepreneurs because I've seen what it's done to my life as a journalist major. And if I would have continued down that path, would be so significantly different than it is today. I'm very fulfilled in my life. I've got a great marriage. I've got a great relationship with my kids. I'm extremely proud of what I do in my work and who we help. And that all started because back the 25-year-old version of myself decided that he wanted to be a franchisee and took that leap and then just continued to roll it into more things. So, I could probably continue to go on if you want me to, but I'll stick with those. I really appreciate those two things.
Awesome. One last question for you. And it's really, if I were to think about my experience, knowing you over the years, is that I would describe you as very focused, extremely intentional. And the thing I love is when I ask you a question, you always have these great frameworks to sort of pull from. You've already sort of thought through the process. Talk to me about balancing being an entrepreneur, a husband, and a father, because I know you to be a very involved family man. For those that maybe have already gotten into business and are sort of struggling with how that can take over your life, how do you manage all that so you can be successful in all three categories?
Thanks for asking. Such an important question. My wife could probably answer it better than I could. And I'll tell you, I failed a lot early in my career. And I think young entrepreneurs might run into this. I was very focused on profits early in my career. And I'd say it took a little bit of a strain on my family life. I wasn't there as much. I was traveling a huge amount. And now at this stage in my life, I feel like I'm doing a really good job at it. But guess what? I have more resources. I can afford great leadership to manage things when I'm not around. And so, the way that I do it today wouldn't necessarily be applicable to the new entrepreneur. But for the new entrepreneur, I would say you need to be extremely clear in what's important to your life. Years ago, met a guy named John DeJulius. I know you know him as well.
Yeah, of course.
We're having dinner, and he pulled out this Credo card out of his wallet, and he shared with me the 3 or 4 things in his life that were kind of his guiding light. And so I committed to myself that month. I went home and defined the 4 things in my own life, and it was be a wonderful husband to my wife Mandy, be an example as a father, make a mark, and be dangerous for good. And the first 2 are family things. The last 2 are somewhat business related. And so I continue, it's hanging up on my mirror at home. I continue to look at that often. My wife and I, we are super intentional about talking about our schedules, where we're going to spend our time. We've got core values with our kids. We have a hectic life. I'm not trying to say that we sit down every night and go over core values with our kids. That's not the case. We are super intentional in the way that we parent them. And just one last story, when Fastlane was being sold, the reason I decided I wanted, outside of the real purposeful nature of wanting to help people buy a business, the reason I decided to move into Sidekick was because number 3 on that list was make a mark. And I didn't want to sell Fastlane and just golf for the rest of my life. That's not my intent. My intent is to make a mark and be an example as a father. And I wanted my kids to see me every day, going to work, helping people, being purposeful. And they ask me questions about it all the time. And I tell them when I die, I hope they get up on that stage and say, Dad said he wanted to help more people buy a franchise than anyone in history. And he did it. Right. So I share that with them. I'm not scared to share that with them. I want them to hold me accountable and to see me do it. And I think it really makes an impact on them.
Awesome. Well, we're going to leave it there. We've been listening to Ryan Zink, the co-founder and CEO of Franchise Sidekick. Ryan, where can people go to learn more about the work you guys are doing?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Obviously, the website, franchisesidekick.com. We're on all the social platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok. We're on there now, Instagram. So I would say start there, and then you could find us. And anybody interested in engaging, it's pretty easy to do right there on the website.
Great. And we'll put the link to the website in the show notes. Thanks for being on today.
I appreciate the invite, Dave.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. Be sure to click subscribe to future episodes so you can hear from more top entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And we'll see you again next time.